Alright, the next section in the Anti-Bullshit-Man saga. Section E, the Orphanage proposal. Yeah, I'd just say this is probably the, so far, most straw man. Just straw man all over the place on this one. The real subject this is related to was the voucher idea. Where we would essentially create a licensing program for procreation, and through that process create a voucher system that allowed people to have a certain number of kids, based on vouchers. Each individual would get a voucher, and that would guarantee a population decline because there would only be enough vouchers for people to replace their population, and some of the vouchers by the militants would never get used. Therefore, population would decrease. And so a couple could have 2 kids, and if they wanted to have more, they had to get grandma's voucher or somebody else's voucher that wasn't already used up. Grandma's probably wouldn't be usable, but your brother or sisters might be, if they don't plan on having kids. And so if you really, really wanted to have a 3rd or 4th kid, you just solicit somebody else to give you a voucher for it. You can make a YouTube video and voucher for it. Well, anyway, that was the subject. And the orphanage proposal came up as a contingency plan against what do you do with the people who won't comply, who will break the law. And then I just expanded on that a little bit. But I have no channel devoted to this subject. I didn't give it a huge amount of thought and say, oh, this is all the nuances of it. I was just going with some kind of idea that I think orphanages shouldn't be draconian in the first place. I think there is a social obligation that we have fallen way short of. These natalist societies, these kid-loving societies, seem to think it's okay to put kids in shitholes. And all through history they've sounded pretty horrific, these orphanages. And maybe that's something parents did on purpose. Maybe they wanted orphanages to be horrible, so their kids would appreciate how wonderful they were. But I don't see any need for them to be horrible in the first place. I don't see any need for them to be horribly expensive. And it's sort of like an argument about even prison or something. It's cheaper to do it right than to do it wrong. It's cheaper to have a prison. You don't need cages, and you don't need all that other crap, because you have some sort of institution from which they can't escape, and you just create mechanisms that allow them to rehabilitate each other. But you can imagine such a prison. You can imagine different ways of doing something that costs a lot less. And that would be my argument, is that with the same money you could do a lot better. But I would even say, even if it costs more money, it's okay. Because it's cheaper than the price of the kids out in the street. It's cheaper than the ungraduated, the high school dropouts, being some sort of norm. I don't know why that phone's doing that. Because that's doomed. That's just fail all over the place. So that's where this proposal came out of, this orphanage, this mega orphanage, this Disneyland orphanage idea. Was just some way to deal with the people who don't comply with the law, in some sort of truly aggressive way even, because obviously you could have other penalties, financial penalties, cooperative penalties for going past, breaking the law. You can first give people a fine, but if they keep coming back to court, there's that. I sort of believe in a 3 strikes and you're out kind of policy. And so the argument sort of was, what do you do with the 3 strikers? What do you do with the people you have to throw into a prison because they won't behave? A breeder's prison. And my argument was that I don't think there's any benefit in keeping kids with people who have no respect for the law, have no respect for civilization, society, and democratic process. These are all democratically chosen laws, and I don't think any rational person should think that it's a good idea to have kids raised by radical truther Looney Tunes who think they have a right to tell the rest of society what it's going to do in spite of a fair judicial process that's already been established to decide, and they lost, and they don't accept losing, and so they're petty, weaselly motherfuckers, and they shouldn't have kids anyway. They should be raising kids anyway. So anyway, and this is also look, there's a, I can give you, just as, your whole playing with statistics games and all this crap, we know that we're importing poverty now, we're importing children now, okay, breeders. So you can't talk about what policies have worked and which ones haven't in an atmosphere where they're cheating the game, okay? The domestic population is one thing, the imported population is another thing, and you got to recognize that that's a changing demographics and changing equations about what kind of policy has worked or hasn't worked based on what you're doing to subvert that policy. So anyway, but we know there's 40 million people on food stamps. I mean, single individuals have a really impossible time getting these kind of social benefits. So these are all families with kids. We're basically raising the next generation in poverty. It's just no doubt about it. And that poverty is toxic. In terms of, it's not just a financial poverty, it's a poverty of character all over the place. The dropout rates in places like Chicago are obscene. And so, yeah, there's just, these people shouldn't be raising kids. Part of having a license to raise kids would probably have to have some sort of demonstration. I mean, give them a dog to fucking raise for a year and see if they can keep that alive. I don't know. But, we get into it. There's so many things you can do. Just in terms of, and again, this was a response to something, let's come up with some sort of pragmatic, practical solutions to get us on this road. And I think a voucher system is a doable thing, because I think there are a lot of people who are starting to really resent the poor and resent the sloppiness, the arrogance of them, thinking they can just keep creating social burdens and they don't have to take any responsibility for it. They have kids that aren't even physically, they're so irresponsible that they don't even care about their own genetic deficiencies, and have kids that are a genetic mess. Truly, outrageously preventable harm. So I think there is a capacity to sell that to the majority. And ideas like insurance, if you want to be a parent, maybe there's going to be an obligation where you're going to have to buy at least a minimum amount of insurance against your death, against your divorce, probably more specifically, the split up of your relationship, let's say, the parental relationship. You're going to have to buy insurance, and you're going to have to show that you have the means to pay for the insurance. And this is just, these little ways are ways of putting the financial burden on the breeders, letting them understand that they're the ones that are deciding to do this. It's their recreation, their fun, and they should pay for it. They shouldn't oblige their neighbors to pay for their decision to have children. If they're going to make the decision, they should pay the full freight for it. And part of the full freight in a civilized country is recognizing that if something happens to your relationship, you have to have a contingency plan. And if there is no contingency plan, you have to have something called insurance, because that's the contingency plan of last resort. And if you don't at least have that, you're really, really an irresponsible asshole. And I think that can be sold as a principle, that people have to take responsibility for the risks they take. You want to go bungee jumping, you should probably have to buy some insurance ahead of time, exempting society from having to pay for your brain surgery. You fuckhead. These are just politenesses of civil existence, to recognize that if I'm going to do something indulging my own fucking gratification, and it carries some sort of risk where, yes, the civilization will have to clean me up off the road and they will have to do a few minimums, well then I should take care of those minimums. I should at least pay to have me swept off the road if I want to ride on a motorcycle, and to sweep me into a proper plastic bag and have me properly disposed of. There's just nothing wrong with imposing those kinds of accountabilities, and I think those kinds of accountabilities can be sold to the public. And my only argument was that it's some sort of, it's like the education argument. So I could argue that I could build an orphanage that would just so kick ass as an institution of human inspiration, because it really should be Disney World. Kids should be raised in Disney World. They should be raised in an environment that nurtures them enough, that gives them exposure to all kinds of things, and gives them huge incentive to play with this stuff and to excel at this stuff, to work at it a little bit. Not just walk away, not just look at the cover of science or this or that and walk away. Oh, I don't like math. I'm too stupid to do math. Or this kind of simplistic bullshit that runs the world now. No, force them to do a little, touch it a little bit, feel it a little bit, play with it a little bit, and then see what your aptitudes really are, what your inclinations might be. And yeah, I think we just do so much more. I mean, the whole education system. So this is sort of related to that proposal too, because in my orphanage, I would be paying kids to learn. It seems only sensible. And I'd be paying them to be civilized. The more civilized you are, the more points you get, the more money you get. You know, you be a bully or you do some other bullshit and you get some speeding tickets or whatever, you know, running in the hallway or whatever the thing is, and you lose money. You know. And I'm telling you, that's incentivized behavior and creates strict and honest accountability, and I think you'll raise one hell of a human being. So you can give me all this crap about how kids need parents or they need this or no, they don't need any of that shit. Yes, they do need, we're social animals, and they need a social environment in which adults are nurturing try-harders. Okay, they're not pontificating arrogant assholes. They're just sitting there saying, okay, let's hear your argument, fella. I'll treat you as kids love to be treated as an accountable adult. They love it. They love to be challenged. They love to say, hey, I want to do this with my weed. No, and you explain to them why you can't do that. You know, they love an honest relationship with adults, and they love that they'll thrive in that environment. And I'm just saying, we know they don't get that in parental relationships. They get lies and bullshit and nonsense and crap. You know, older sister stuck babysitting because mom wants to go out and get drunk. You know, that kind of crap. They get obligations for which they didn't create. They get burdens imposed that they didn't create. They did none of their behavior. So they learn what injustice. You learn what injustice is in families. That's why I think it would be superior to have an orphanage where every kid could file a suit, file a claim, and say, "Hey, I got ripped off on that deal, so you owe me $50." Yeah, it's only fair. So whatever. I just find this critique totally excessive, totally irrelevant to the context in which I've brought up this orphanage proposal. Again, I haven't written out some with huge detail. In my opinion, this nitpick that you did, this is just a nitpick, isn't any better than the nitpicks I get on the educational proposal of paying kids instead of teachers, where for every argument I have a counter argument. Yes, everything requires, there's devils in the details, but the details are manageable. They're all manageable. And you know, you're just sounding kind of like, you know, the typical bullshit, you know. All communism is the Soviet Union. There, it's proven. Communism doesn't work because the Soviet Union didn't work. Therefore, we don't have to have this argument ever again. They tried it once and they failed. Therefore, you can't ever try anything ever again that looks a little bit red. So, I mean, I just find there a huge hypocrisy in your complaints about the short shrift others get when you might get from others when you're so willing to short shrift like this. So, and especially in this environment where somehow I'm going to create some social burden that encourages people to have kids. No, there's going to be hard incentives for people not to have kids. So there's not going to be any way that somebody's going to win playing the orphanage game. And I would argue that you can do this so much cheaper than having kids raised in slums. It'll be so much cheaper in the long run to have a kid in a great orphanage than to have them in a slum, because you're going to get one kick-ass of a human being out of the orphanage machine versus the asshole you're going to get out of the slums. Right there, it's win, because the future potential of the individual to do damage is greatly reduced. And on top of that, I think the plain price of it will be cheaper, because obviously slums just end up burning all the money you give them. They squander it on booze and drugs and squalor and piggery. And yeah, it's about the most expensive way to raise a kid is in a slum. Yeah, because none of the money gets to the kid. So, and then none of it's spent at all rationally, right? You know, they fix the floor before they fix the roof, the leaky roof. You know, it's that kind of thing. They just keep going back and forth because they're not smart enough to fix the roof before they fix the floor. Yeah, so I don't want to beat it to death, but yeah, and I don't really, you know, this is not one of my key, this is not the thing I'm focusing on. I'd rather argue the voucher system than argue this contingency against people violating the voucher system. I mean, that's getting way, way, way down the road and into a detail that I don't think is necessary. And so I think it just sucks that you tried to make this some sort of key proposal of mine, and it sucks to go into this minutia detail, assuming that I wouldn't be able to find simple counter arguments to these minor gripes you have about the idea of what it takes to raise a kid. And I don't think it's that complicated. It takes a warm environment. It takes a hug now and then, maybe. Okay, I'll get into that little sappy stuff. A hug now and then. And incentives. Lots of incentives. So anyway, you're not going to find that in the average American breeding family. The average American breeding family is all disincentives and horror. And yeah, it's just you're just gonna make monsters raising kids on welfare and food stamps. Anyway, until next time.